We're pretty small in the scheme of things, really, as humans. The power of Mother Nature was just incomprehensible. I couldn't understand it. I couldn't wrap my head around it. We were waiting to die, waiting to live. I didn't really know.
Do you hear that? The ground is shaking.
Oh my God.
I turned around and saw this wall of ice.
Whoa, 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 whoa!
Yeah, look. Whoa, whoa, inside. You're just thinking about, is this the right decision at this particular point in time or not? And does it matter anymore? Close the door!
We ran out of the building. It was pandemonium, chaos. The ground was rolling. I thought, this is where we die.
In 2015, a massive earthquake rocks Nepal.
It's like a plane crash or something.
The earthquake triggers massive avalanches that wreak terrible destruction on Everest and the remote valley of Langtang. Now, survivors' footage, eyewitness accounts, and expert scientific analysis reveal how a series of critical events combined to create an avalanche that strikes with the power of half an atom bomb. Nepal, the Himalayas, rooftop of the world, and a mecca for mountaineers.
Hey, welcome to base camp. Here we are. Yeah, this is the Kumba Icefall. Camp 1 is up to the right, and Everest is behind all of this. You can't really see it. I was in Nepal attempting to climb Mount Everest as the last peak of my 7 Summits challenge to climb the highest peaks on all 7 continents. Nepal feels different. It's a country full of mountains, and you've got to trek for days and days and days just to get sight of the mountain as well. I'd been on Everest itself the year before, in 2014. First time I'd attempt to climb the mountain. We got about 18 days in, and there had been, unfortunately, a huge disaster on the icefall, which killed many Sherpa, and so that expedition had to be cancelled. When you get up there and into base camp and you see this 360 view of the world's highest mountains, it is quite magical.
I wanted to climb Everest like my father. My father is also a climber.
Mountain guide Dawa Sherpa has reached the summit of Everest 4 times. He too was a witness to the deaths of his fellow Sherpas the year before. But this hasn't stopped Dawa wanting to climb the mountain again.
My parents think that it's not safe. And my parents also did a lot of investment for my education. And they are not happy that I'm still working as a climbing Sherpa.
Attempting to climb Everest for the first time is geologist Jim Davidson.
I've been a hiker and a skier and a climber for 35 years. But I also had a career as a geologist as well. I've been dreaming about climbing Everest for 30 years. It's one of the younger mountain ranges, so it's very dramatic. And you can just see the mountain forming and the glaciers moving and the valleys eroding. It's all right there in front of you.
"80 miles east of Everest is the Langtang Valley.
The mountains blew me away. Just hiking on the trails, there's rhododendron trees and monkeys, running around the trees.
Kat Heldman has been a climber for 20 years. Visiting Nepal has been her dream for just as long.
You look up and these mountains are incredible. I mean, they're like nothing, they were like nothing I had ever seen. It was kind of exactly what I imagined. It like made my dreams come alive. It was really, really cool.
For those who live in the Langtang Valley, it's a sacred place.
Langtang Valley is a hidden valley. People in Langtang start to live more than 700 to 900 years back, you know. This Langtang Valley was used by many of the reincarnation lamas for meditations to get enlightenment. Even 8th century meditation cave still you can see in Langtang.
Born and raised in the valley, Lakpa Jangba is realizing the dream of his late father to run a bakery.
My father really wants to create a small bakery cafe. He really wants to create something good out of it. And beside that, he really wants to give more information to the people about the Langtang region, about the cultures, about the stories of the Langtang.
On Everest on April the 25th, Jim Davidson begins his ascent to the mountain with a dangerous climb from base camp across the icefall up to Camp 1, 2,510 feet above.
So we got up in the middle of the night and left camp during the coldest hours, about 2 o'clock in the morning, to try and climb through the unstable icefall when it's most cold and hopefully most frozen and not moving.
All right, that's a big crevasse. We'll cruise on across. Ooh, love the movement.
And arrived at Camp 1 around 8 o'clock in the morning.
Back at base camp, Paul Devaney is waiting to make his ascent to Camp 1 the next day.
We were in our mess tent, a few of us just sitting around playing cards. You know, I think the Wi-Fi had finally started working, so maybe trying to get some messages out, maybe get the odd picture out just before we head off into the icefall.
We've got a prime view of what we're going into next, so we're going to head off into the Kumba Icefall. We're going to follow a route kind of right of center.
That morning, the Langtang Valley is unusually busy with tourists and worshippers visiting a nearby Buddhist monastery to attend a Gewa, a ceremony to help the soul towards rebirth. Lakpa Jangba is amongst them.
I went down to the Gewa, helping these families to organize things and distributing foods, you know, and doing prayings and all.
Afterwards, Lakpa briefly visits his mother in Langtang village before the 3-hour walk up the valley towards his bakery in Kianjin Gompa. That morning, Kat Heldman is also in Langtang village.
We didn't really have that much time, you know, in each little village, and I particularly wanted to stay in Langtang, but Oscar, our climbing partner, is very much a stickler for time, for sticking to the schedule. So, you know, he always made sure that we left on time.
So at 8:30, Kat's group also heads up to the village of Kianjin Gompa. Nearly 40 miles south of Langtang is Nepal's capital, Kathmandu. This bustling city is a base for helicopter pilot Dougie Gray.
I was on a day off, and for the first time ever, I actually went to bed for a little snooze in the middle of the day. All that I was aware of was a rumble, a noise, I don't know. And I sort of became aware. And then my earthquake alarm went off. So, jumped out of bed, pulled on my shorts, grabbed the t-shirt, ran down the stairs. As I went down through the hallway, a big chandelier had crashed down to the floor already, and there's broken glass everywhere. And I ran straight outside and pushed my shoulders up against the wall and turned and looked at the building and saw it wobbling. And that just scared me.
An earthquake has struck 51 miles northwest of Kathmandu, measuring 7.8 on the Richter scale. Its shock waves quickly reach Everest Base Camp.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow, that's big. No. It's a sound. And it's the sound and its movement, but your body is not able to process the movement bit of it yet. Oh, wow. So we looked up into the icefall because that's where you think the danger is going to come from. And all the time, this incredible movement going on under our feet.
Up at Camp 1, Jim Davidson feels the shock waves too.
As I reached for the tent door, I missed the zipper. I missed by about a foot, because all of a sudden the tent just lifted into the air about 1 foot, hovered for about 2 seconds, and then dropped vertically back down. And that's when the first waves of the earthquake were rippling through the glacier. We were getting knocked down off our knees because the whole tent was rising up and down, just like being in a life raft on the ocean as ocean swells went underneath the tent. Here comes another one. Can't tell. The noise was getting louder and louder, and visibility dropped from 100 yards to about 5 yards. And with all of that coming together, that's when we knew we were in the middle of something really huge.
Everything is shaking.
There are 1,000 people on the mountain. All are now in danger.
Do you hear that?
High above, the earthquake has dislodged huge amounts of snow and ice, which is now bearing down on base camp.
And in seconds then, we turned around and saw this wall of ice. We didn't know what was in it.
Whoa, 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 whoa!
We ran inside the tent and we got under the table, and we didn't have a whole lot of great options.
Close the door! Oh, wow. That's huge. That's huge.
Everybody was terrified. And my thought was like, to hide under the table is the last option to survive.
Oh, wow.
We wanted to get underneath something or around something structural that could take some of the impact. You're just thinking about, is this the right decision at this particular point in time or not? And does it matter anymore?
Come on.
As Everest experiences the first violent moments of an earthquake, so does the Langtang Valley to its west. The village of Kianjin-Gompa is shaking.
We ran out of the building. It was pandemonium, chaos. The ground was rolling. You couldn't get your equilibrium. At some point, we realized that Brigida, our climbing partner, wasn't with us. So we started yelling for her. You know, Brigida, Brigida, come out, come out.
Brigida! Are you okay?
You okay?
Come out!
I just ran in to try to find her. She was up on the second floor, and she was crouched underneath a doorway. It was just seconds. I felt immediate relief because I thought it was over. Everything's fine now. And then Kevin looked up and said, "Look, look, look."
Look, 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 look.
And we looked up and we saw, just looked like, what is that? It is this giant plume of, rock, ice, and snow. So, we did what you do in that circumstance, which is you run for your life. Then I felt the first impact of the avalanche, and I knew that there was no way I was going to stay on my feet because it was so powerful. I thought, this is where we die.
In avalanche, there's no use of running here and there. You can blow away quite easily. I just hide beneath the end of my bakery, and after a few seconds, I saw everything was flying. The wind is so strong that you couldn't breathe. Everyone was thinking like it's the end of the world.
Lakpa's neighbor, Karcham, her daughter and 2-year-old son, Landrup, are also caught up in the avalanche.
I was unconscious for like 2-3 minutes. I can't remember what was happening. I was totally covered by snow. The ice was very heavy ice with watery ice. After like a minute, I hear the sound of my daughter who was shivering. So I take my daughter and I ran to look for my son.
Karcham leaves her house to ask Lakpa for help.
Brother, my son is nowhere. I don't know what to do. And then I realized when I was hiding beneath my house, I saw the child was flying and somebody catches by ears and hold. I saw the one Sherpa was holding the child and saying, "Take." And when I checked this child, the child was not crying at all. And I just shake him a little bit, and he didn't respond.
Everest Base Camp has also been hit by a massive avalanche.
I've never seen anything come at us like that before.
Okay.
Outside is a scene of total devastation.
You okay, Denny? Yeah, I'm okay. I'm fine. You okay? That's so good. That's big.
So many people came on today.
I know.
Now, so many people came on.
Let's hope they're okay. What the hell has just happened? Oh my God. Oh wow.
I went outside and I see there was a terrific scene like I never saw before. It was like a war zone.
We heard the radios going and we heard people asking for help in the middle of camp. And so we started out towards the middle of camp, a few of us, and as you're walking, you start to see some equipment scattered. And then you're looking at camps that are no longer camps, they're just torn shreds of tents. So you're aware that the whole middle of base camp was this disaster area.
It really is something else. Yeah, it's like a plane crash or something. It's hard to imagine what's just happened here in the last few hours.
In the Langtang Valley in the village of Kianjangompa, it becomes clear that the avalanche there has also brought terrible devastation.
It stopped, and it got quiet. The whole village that we were in was half gone. All these buildings, they didn't have any roofs left on them. Half of them were just blown away. For all we knew, it was just localized to where we were or close to us.
But gradually, they began to hear reports from further down the valley.
By this time, people had started coming up. A few survivors had started coming up from Long Tong, and what they said was, Long Tong is gone.
In the Langtang Valley, the earthquake and avalanche have left Lakpa Jangba's bakery and home in ruins. Although his immediate concern is for his family further down the valley in Langtang village.
And then I run. From the edge of these hills down all the way, almost like 6 kilometers.
Nothing can prepare Lakpa for what he sees next.
And other side of the rivers, everything, it was a big, dusty, black mud covering Langtang. No sign of a single thing. It was totally flat.
Langtang, a settlement of more than 100 buildings, is completely buried. One of the first from outside the valley to see the impact of the avalanche is helicopter pilot Dougie Gray.
Well, where the village was just solid flow of mud from one side of the valley straight across down to the bottom and completely filling in the bottom of the valley. You could see where all the dust had blown up the other side. And any buildings that hadn't been taken out with the landslide, everything was just devastation. Blew down trees for kilometers down the valley. Impossible to visualize in your mind other as what you would see after a nuclear explosion. And if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I would have said, you're telling lies, it's rubbish, that's impossible.
One of the first scientists on the scene in Langtang Valley is geologist Ranjan Kumar Dahal. Quickly, it becomes clear to him from the vast amounts of debris that has buried Langtang village that this is no ordinary avalanche.
You can see these boulders. Actually, it's a product of rockfall, and you can see whole area here. It belongs to this same composition of rock type.
The debris that hits Langtang still covers the valley floor.
In the case of the Langtang Valley, the size of the avalanche and the material within the avalanche was very different. It's not like what we have in the simple snow avalanche. It crossed that ridge with the high speed of all the debris avalanche mixed with the ice and the snow. And it comes with a very high speed, and then it hits the village.
Analyzing the rocks, Dr. Dahal discovers they originated high up on the mountain, plummeting 10,000 feet down onto Langtang.
As a result, everything just demolished and nothing remained over there.
What happens at Langtang village makes it an important case study for avalanche expert Dr. Perry Bartelt in Davos, Switzerland.
I think what was unusual was the sheer size of the Langtang event. It started with 5 million tons of material and grew another 10 million tons to become a 15 million ton avalanche. And that is extremely, extremely large. It's very, very surprising and very unusual for us to work with these very, very large mass movements.
Using satellite imagery, Perry can work out the path of this monster avalanche.
Here you see the 4 release zones that we identified. From this release zone, the avalanche starts. It entrains a considerable amount of mass. And here, this red represents the speed of the avalanche. The avalanche in this particular release zone is traveling at a speed of over 100 meters per second.
When the earthquake strikes, falling blocks of ice nearly 10,000 feet above Langtang trigger a vast avalanche of ice, snow, and other debris. As it grows in size and speed, it gains enough momentum to travel across a flatter zone towards a sheer cliff that towers over Langtang. There, it plunges with a second acceleration directly onto the village.
And so what we saw was that the entrainment allowed the avalanche to traverse a very flat slope and then reach this steep region, become accelerated once again, and then hit the village of Langtang.
The impact is equivalent to more than 7.5 kilotons of TNT explosive, nearly half the size of the Hiroshima atomic bomb. In the desolate landscape, Lakpa tries to find his family's home.
I will go and I will see where my family's place are. And when I went there, I couldn't recognize where it used to be. And then I realized my house must be minimum 20 meters beneath where I'm standing. And then I lose hope. Then I thought maybe this is the end. Now it's not possible to get them back.
Lakpa's mother and 8 other members of his family are dead. The terrible cost of this disaster is now becoming apparent. At Everest Base Camp, the earthquake and resulting avalanche has left devastation in its wake.
As you're walking through, it's just the remains of camps on either side of you. There's nothing. Where we had seen big expedition teams, there was nothing but, scarred remains of all of their equipment.
You can see some of the carnage here. We're just right of middle. The worst damage is just right behind us here, but this is some of it.
As survivors search for friends and teammates, the scale of the disaster becomes apparent.
It's a scene of pretty surreal devastation. It really is something else.
17 are found dead, while many others are seriously injured and fighting for their lives. The Everest Avalanche originates between 2 peaks high above base camp, Pumori and Lingtran.
In this particular case, when the mountain shook, it let loose ice and probably rock as well, and that big wave of debris came flying down 3,000, 4,000 vertical feet.
This lethal rush of material kills not only by suffocation, but trauma wounds inflicted by a hidden killer that comes with an avalanche.
There's just so much force coming down with the ice and rock that force gets transferred into wind. When all the debris of the first avalanche stops, it puts all that inertia, all that momentum into the air.
This airborne momentum contained in the dust particles and the dust cloud and in the air that is moving is detached from the ground. And because it's detached from the ground, it experiences less friction. And therefore, it can take a trajectory independent of the terrain.
And it creates this huge wind blast. And that air blast went right up over a ridge behind camp and blasted through camp, carrying ice and powder and dirt and rocks. And that, was cannon fire that just blasted through the middle third of camp.
The shockwave and the energy caused all of that snow, along with everything else around it, to start heading towards base camp at high speed. And along the way, it picked up different things that it found And base camp is full of kitchen equipment, and it's full of tents, and it's full of everything that makes all of this even worse, because all of those things became missiles.
The avalanche that hit Langtang village also brings with it an air blast. But here it's even more powerful.
Now, the air blast speed that hit Langtang was probably on the order of about 100 to 120 kilometers an hour. It was going at the speed that you would travel on a highway. What this meant was that the pressures that the buildings experienced in Langtang by the air blast was enough to destroy and knock over many of these buildings.
The devastating air blast leaves a trail of total destruction within a radius of 2 miles of the village. Hundreds are killed. Just outside the blast zone, up the valley in Kianjangompa, Kat Heldman does her best to care for the injured.
I remember the wailing. And it was just like the sounds of people wailing. We were just trying to rescue people. We were digging them out. There was one elderly Nepalese lady, and her head just kept bleeding and bleeding and bleeding. And we kept wrapping, we wrapped her head, and I stayed there with them while they started bringing people. And I just sang Amazing Grace to them because I didn't know what else to do. And then gave them tea. I remember this is kind of gross, but I was putting tea in my mouth and dripping it into their mouths because this lady, she couldn't move, I didn't know how else to get it into her mouth. And they needed to be in a hospital. And wishing that was the case, but that wasn't the case. So just comforting them, so they wouldn't, mostly because I didn't know if they were dying. I didn't want them to be alone.
The young son of Lakpa's neighbor is one of those most in need of urgent treatment.
This little boy leg was broken into 3 pieces. I never thought it was broke,
Oh, I was very afraid. I cried. Little legs was broken in 3 places.
This baby had its pelvis and legs were crushed. And so Brigida, she's a travel nurse, and she wrapped the baby's legs with some remnants of shirts that we ripped up and made sure that the legs were elevated.
In Langtang Valley, the day ends with the seriously wounded in desperate need of evacuation, but there is no sign of help. And on Everest, poor visibility means that rescue is impossible. All are stranded. The day after the earthquake and avalanche, the clouds over Everest lift.
So the helicopters were in from 6:30 almost in the morning, starting to ferry people back to Kathmandu. First the seriously injured to get them back to hospital. There were 60 people with some pretty bad injuries. So another day of having to manage those would have been very uncomfortable for those people and might have increased the fatalities.
Uninjured, Paul is able to leave base camp on foot. But above at Camp 1, Jim Davidson is still in danger. The earthquake has rendered the icefall below unstable. So climbing down to base camp is not an option. The only way out is by helicopter, dangerous at this high altitude with this thin air. On the second day after the earthquake, Jim gets his chance.
They told us to be ready to go when the sun first comes up because it's the coldest part of the day, the air is most dense, and that gives the helicopters a little bit more of a bite in the thin air. We were very lucky that the weather was clear and the helicopters started arriving around 6 a.m. And normally these helicopters can carry 6 people down at sea level, but up here in the thin air, they can only carry 3 people. And so we just piled in the helicopters 2 by 2, and to save weight, they took out the seats and the seat belts. So you would just crawl in the helicopter and sit on the floor, and go for the wildest ride in your life as that helicopter could just barely lift off at 19,800 feet at its maximum lifting capacity. The air is less than half the thickness that it is at sea level. So that means the helicopter has less than half of its normal lift. And as a result, to get that last little bit of performance, the pilots will skim close to the ground to try and get the lift as the air from the blades hits the ground, bounces back up. They call it a ground effect. And that gives the helicopter just a little bit more lift. But what that means is the helicopters fly 50 to 70 feet across the ground the whole way and descended 2,000 vertical feet in just about a minute, flying back down to base camp.
In the Langtang Valley, survivors are less fortunate. Those in the village of Kianjengompa continue to wait for help to arrive from the skies.
You imagine that, when a disaster occurs, that the military is going to arrive to rescue you. We had no idea that the whole country had, suffered.
The Nepalese government have very few helicopters available for evacuations during this nationwide emergency, so precious resources are thinly spread.
I feel like the days that followed, for me, a lot of it was a blur. We just kept checking on people, going back to help them as best we could. I just kept thinking, God, these people, they need to be in hospitals. Like, we need a hospital, we need help.
When a helicopter finally does arrive, it's a private hire, reserved for Western tourists. This helivac causes confusion and misunderstanding.
I just couldn't understand why people that appeared perfectly fine were getting on a helicopter when we had this severely injured baby.
And then I just went to the pilot side and I told him, our people are very, very serious. Can you help us to drop them and you come back again to pick these people? He said no.
A whole group of people, and it was both Westerners and Nepalese that ran to the helicopter and would not let it take off.
Then there were other people. Somebody was holding big sticks, somebody was holding stones, and they were shouting like, "We didn't ask you to give us something. We asked you to save our people."
After they are told of the critical state of the wounded, the tourists agree to give up their seats.
And then I put these injured people and this injured boy, put everyone in.
When that baby got on the helicopter, it was like a sigh of relief, just a big sigh of relief.
The human cost of the earthquake of the 25th of April 2015 is terrible. At least 20 people are killed on Everest. It's thought 350 Nepalese and tourists lose their lives in Langtang village. In all, the death toll in Nepal is almost 9,000. More than 600,000 buildings are either destroyed or badly damaged. 2.8 million people are displaced. The earthquake is so powerful that it moves the whole of Nepal more than 2 meters to the south. Given its geography, Nepal will experience more of these nation-shifting earthquakes in the future, and the avalanches that come with them may be bigger and deadlier.
One of the things that we're finding now, and this has a lot to do with climate change, is if you change the temperature of your substrate just by a little bit, you can change the whole dynamics of the avalanche. And this is something to be very, very concerned about in the future. These very large mass events are becoming more common, and they're becoming more and more dangerous.
Latpa Jangba is still in touch with those he helped to rescue in the Langtang Valley, including the now 6-year-old Landrup, living with his family in Kathmandu.
Now he is all right, but I can't say he is totally all right because he has a problem around his knees, but he don't feel that. He says, oh, I'm all right, I can run with friends, I can play, I can do everything, don't worry.
The trauma of her experience in Langtang has stayed with Kat Heldman long after returning home.
I felt deep grief, deep sorrow for all the people that had died. I also felt lucky to have been given another day on the planet.
This year, for the first time, she feels strong enough to return to mark the anniversary of the earthquake. Memories of the tragedy remain with Paul Devaney, too. But in 2020, he plans to go back and complete his goal to scale Everest. Jim Davidson did go back in 2017, and he made it to the summit. Much to the concern of his parents, Dawa Sherpa wants to climb the mountain again.
Climbing is in my blood, but I can't be happy without climbing. For my parents, like, to work in office is safe. My mom was saying, I survived 2014, I survived 2015, and the third time, you will definitely die. Maybe I can convince my parents one day, and I could go to the mountains again to stand on the top of Mount Everest for the 5th time.
In Langtang, 4 years on, they're still working hard to bring the valley back to life. Lakpa Jangba has rebuilt his bakery, but the monastery where he attends the Gewa before the earthquake is still in ruins. Nepalese like Lakpa speak of the earthquake in spiritual terms. Bad karma, a loss of tradition, a greed that comes with tourism, a sickness in the soul.
We have many spiritual powers around us. We always worship them. We have been following more old traditional way of life. But after the tourism started, the life is totally changed. The traditional way of worship has been slowly disappearing. And when these gods are angry, something big gonna happen. Because when you don't worship them properly, then they get angry. Because it's a give and take. People only start taking but never give back. That's the reason why these gods are angry and this big disaster happens.
It happened so quickly. It was like a bomb went off.
In 2017, central Portugal is hit by a devastating wildfire.
Day had turned to night within seconds.
We just thought, whoa, we need to leave. We need to get out.
It was pure panic. All you could see was people screaming.
I honestly thought I would die there.
It's the worst wildfire in Portugal's history. Its aftermath is devastating. It's a tragedy that leaves an entire nation stunned. Now, eyewitness accounts, survivors' footage, and expert scientific analysis reveal how a series of critical events combine to create an unprecedented disaster. In the heart of central Portugal is the region of Pedrógão Grande. It's a rural area of densely forested rolling hills, dotted with small picturesque towns and villages.
I moved to the village with my wife Jackie about 10 years ago. Came here from the UK, just really to find a better way of life, I suppose. And the locals have made us very welcome here. They've accepted us. We've made a good little life here. It's very peaceful and calm, a tranquil little place, yeah.
I live with my husband, my parents, and my son. In the village, we all know each other. We are good friends. We get on with each other and help each other out. We all live in harmony with one another.
I wasn't born here, but have been in Pedrógão for 40 years. It was, and still is, beautiful. Everyone knows each other. People help each other, help their neighbors. Should a neighbor need anything, we are always there.
In the summer months, Pedrógão Grande can be extremely hot, with temperatures often reaching 85 degrees Fahrenheit. But 2017 is a record breaker.
2017 was a very, very hot summer. We had already been warned it would be very hot, but we never thought the temperature would go that high.
By June, there's been no rain for 3 weeks, and temperatures hit 100 degrees Fahrenheit.
Fire is quite common in Portugal. In a normal fire season, yes, you do have fires, you do have damage, but the fire services can cope with it.
But 2017 is far from ordinary. Before the prolonged drought, Pedrógão Grande received abundant rainfall, creating the perfect conditions for a major fire season.
You had that period of time where you had more precipitation, more rainfall, you had a lot of fuels grow, and then that gives you that much more fuel to burn. And that's one of the perfect recipes you can get for fires. Any sort of fire that was gonna ignite during this time frame had the potential to be problematic.
In 2017, the weather was extreme, perfect fire weather. The landscape was bone dry and covered in thick forest. So all that was needed for a disaster fire to happen was one spark.
On June 17th at 2:30 p.m., a small fire is reported in a densely forested river valley 3 miles from the town of Pedrógão Grande. Fire Chief Sergio Lorenzo immediately responds.
That day I was home. I had just finished my lunch when I heard the siren. I knew that when the siren goes off, that there's a fire, and they are calling the firemen in. I got into my uniform, and I took the command car. And I went as fast as I could. towards the fire. I thought it would be a bit more of a difficult fire. Due to the heat we had that day, it was already really hot.
In the time it takes Sergio to arrive at the fire, it's developed and spreading fast.
This area here was all covered in flames. The fire covered everything. There was a lot of heat and lots of smoke, thick smoke.
Sergio immediately marshals the approaching fire trucks to try and get them ahead of the growing blaze.
My priority is always to find routes and roads, to put combat cars in front of the fire.
4 miles away, Dave and his wife Jackie are at home in Figueira.
I think we noticed the fire probably about mid-afternoon. We could see it from the balcony.
Maria de São is also at home in the nearby village of Notarinho.
I was at home, then I went outside and saw smoke towards Pedrógão. So I went back in the house and told my husband.
By 3 p.m., the fire is spreading rapidly south from the ignition site. The speed of the fire's expansion is partly down to the type of trees planted here, used extensively by Portugal's paper industry.
We're in a eucalyptus forest here. You see these beautiful quality trees. They're producing good fiber for pulp and paper. Eucalyptus is native to Australia and was exported from there to many parts of the world, including Portugal. Eucalyptus has some very positive traits in terms of forestry. It is a very fast-growing species. And after the first rotation, it resprouts, and you get a second and a third rotation with no replanting.
But there is one major drawback to eucalyptus.
They're also producing a lot of litter on the ground here. Very burnable, flammable litter. The price you pay for this beautiful, easy-to-farm tree is you increase your fire hazard because you produce that type of litter that is waiting for a fire to happen. It also produces this kind of bark that is peeling off. If this catches fire, the wind takes it away. And this makes it also possible for a surface fire to climb up into the canopy, and it will ignite fire somewhere else.
This ability for eucalyptus embers to travel on the wind and start further fires is a phenomenon known as spotting. At the University of Coimbra Fire Lab in central Portugal, Professor Domingos Viegas studies fire in a controlled environment to analyze its behavior.
The point of this experiment is to look at the spotting produced by eucalyptus trees. And we want to see what are the conditions in which the eucalyptus tree burn and how it spreads spots at different distance, varying the velocity of the wind.
Eucalyptus is especially prone to spotting compared to other tree species. With spot fires, you get additional multiple ignitions ahead of your main fire, which means you're dealing with several fires in the same landscape.
Professor Viegas's experiments have discovered that eucalyptus is capable of starting new fires over vast distances.
In Portugal, we have registered spotting from eucalyptus bark at 10 to 11 kilometers.
Carried on the wind and spreading fast, the Pedrógão Grande fire grows increasingly out of control. By 3:45 p.m., Firefighters from across the Pedrogo Grande region battle to control the fire, which now covers 61 acres. To make matters worse, a completely new fire is reported over 7 miles away from the first fire. Volunteer firefighter Fernando Tomé is called to his station. He and his crew of 4 race to the site of the new fire.
When we got to the fire zone, we were all surprised. I was surprised. We said, this is chaos.
Just like the main fire, it's spreading fast. The eucalyptus forests are densely planted and largely unmanaged. With very few fire breaks and woodland that grows right up to roads and houses, there is nothing to stand in the fire's way. As the main fire continues its relentless march south, it burns so fiercely it begins to create its own weather system. A thick vertical column of smoke and ash is formed above the fire. Within it, hot air, loaded with moisture from the vegetation, rises rapidly to create a fire-formed cloud known as a pyrocumulus. The hot, rising plume draws in fresh, oxygen-rich air from around the fire, creating strong winds at ground level that fan the flames even further.
You get wind and air rushing towards the center of the fire. It starts burning hotter, which means more air needs to come into it. That process keeps repeating. Essentially, it becomes this kind of self-sustaining entity.
As the pyrocumulus cloud continues to grow, there's another, even more dangerous situation developing. To the southeast, dry thunderstorms are forming and heading straight for the fire.
So dry thunderstorms are essentially a thunderstorm, but much of the precipitation will evaporate before it reaches the ground. I mean, if you're dreaming up worst case scenario, this would pretty much be it. When dry thunderstorms are nearby, not only can you start new fires from the cloud to ground lightning, but then you can get strong winds emanating from these thunderstorms.
Until now, the prevailing wind has spread the fire directly southwards, ensuring the fierce and rapidly moving fire front remains narrow. But as the thunderstorm arrives, its violent gusts quickly cause the wind direction to change by 90 degrees. In an instant, what used to be the long, slow-burning western flank of the fire becomes a new, vast fire front that quickly begins spreading west.
It just created this almost unbelievable scenario for fire spread. Not only do you have a much quicker spreading fire, but you also have a wider flaming front that is going to encounter, more fuel and endanger more people and more residences.
For those trying to fight the fire, this sudden shift is a potential killer.
Many firefighters, common tactics is you can work around the flanks to try to kind of hem in the fire. And so if you're on the flanks and then the flank all of a sudden becomes the head fire, that's a very dangerous situation.
Fire Chief Sergio Lorenzo is among those who are close to the fire's new western front.
The fire started to get worse. The smoke blocked the sun out so much. It was dark as night. It started spreading. So it was growing larger and larger. The speed was such that we couldn't keep up with it.
By 6:30 p.m., The vast fire front is spreading rapidly westwards and approaching Maria's village fast.
When I came outside, you couldn't see a thing. It was all dark, there was no sun. The wind was so strong, it was hard to stand up. It made us fall over. It was all dark, pitch black, you couldn't see anything. It was... I can't explain. It was hell.
As the fire reaches the outskirts of Maria's village, she realizes she has to make a life or death decision, to stay or try to escape in her car. But she's left it too late.
I couldn't drive away because the flames were already crossing the road. Then I remembered the water tank and thought, let's get to the water. We really thought we would all die. So I got my mother and we went into the water.
A mile away, Dave realizes that the fire is far more serious than he first thought.
Basically, the whole horizon was just filled with a wall of smoke as far as the eye could see. And I'm talking about maybe 20 kilometers. And you could hear like a roar, as if it was a roar of the ocean. This was a big fire out of control. Jackie and I went back down into the courtyard. In that short space of time, things had worsened unbelievably. Day had turned to night within seconds. We ran for the hose and we weren't achieving much. Some of the olive trees had taken alight and the eucalypt at the bottom was catching alight as well.
As the blaze rapidly approaches the house, Dave and his wife Jackie are forced to make the same life or death decision, to stay or try to escape.
We decided to get the vehicles and leave the property. I said to Jackie, follow me. Jackie was behind me with the dogs in the small van. The conditions were worsening by the second. There was fire everywhere, both sides of the road. The smoke was just unbelievable, and you could feel the intensity of the heat. I should think some of the flames would have been 20, 30 foot tall. The trees here, all ablaze, everything alight. You could even feel the heat in the vehicle.
Dave doesn't realize it, but he and Jackie are heading straight into the main fire front. By 7:30 p.m., the Pedrogo Grande fire has devoured more than 6,500 acres, and spotting has spawned multiple smaller fires. Now these fires merge to create one unbroken fire front.
Fires interact with each other or merge. It can increase the intensity of the fires and can increase its rate of spread. And that's a very dangerous situation.
As the fires merge and intensify, temperatures reach as much as 3,600 degrees Fahrenheit, and volatile winds reach speeds of 80 miles per hour.
Soaring temperatures in Portugal are threatening efforts to bring a raging forest fire under control, according to the country's officials.
As Portugal's monster wildfire begins to make headlines around the world, the news that her hometown of Figueiro dos Vinhos is in danger reaches Nadia Piazza.
When I heard about the fire, I was working in Ireland. I started to find out about it through social media, getting updates from people about a large fire in the Pedrógão Grande area. At that moment, I had a very bad feeling.
Nadia tries to call her 4-year-old son in Pedrógão Grande, who is with his dad, her ex-husband, but the fire has destroyed telephone masts across the region.
I couldn't reach his father or anyone. That got me panicking.
In the heart of the inferno, Fire Chief Sergio Lorenzo navigates blazing back roads as he continues to coordinate fire crews. Suddenly, he sees a man stumbling out of the smoke.
His hands and his face. You could see they were all burned. That's what I saw first. What immediately jumped out at me were his hands. His hands were all covered in blood and totally burned. His face too. We couldn't even make out his ears when he came out of the fire. My concern was to get him out of here, from where the fire was, so I could try to help him.
Sergio manages to escape the fire and get the man to safety, where he is treated for his burns. 4 miles away, Dave and his wife Jackie, who's following close behind, are unwittingly driving towards the fire. With 20-foot flames and intense heat on both sides of the road, Dave's vehicle starts to falter.
The van started to splutter, and all to the right of me here, the smoke and the flames were just coming over the top of the vehicle. 20 or 30 yards up the road after that, the van just cut out. And I thought, this isn't good. I've got to do something. And that's when I decided I had to get out of the vehicle. My first reaction was to call Jackie, thinking she was behind me. To my horror, she wasn't behind me. I couldn't believe that Jackie wasn't there. We left in such a panic. I didn't even have a mobile phone on me. I just hoped and prayed that she had the sense to turn round and go back to the house. I was just hoping and praying that that's what she'd done.
As the village of Notorino is engulfed in flames, Maria and her elderly parents are joined in a small water tank by other villagers. They too are desperate to escape the ferocious heat and flames.
There were probably 11, 12 people inside the tank. The air was very heavy, and we still felt the heat because the wind was so strong that was pushing the flames from outside into the tank. We were throwing water over ourselves because the temperature was so unbearably hot. It burned. We could feel the heat on our bodies, even though we were in the water. Everyone was crying and screaming. It was pure panic.
Then, from the water tank, Maria sees another local family trying to escape by car.
Gina drove past us, and I screamed and said, "Gina, stop the car and come into the water." She didn't hear me and kept driving. There was so much smoke and fire, she couldn't see and veered off to the side of the road.
Gina and her son escape the car, but her mother and 4-year-old daughter are trapped in the back seat.
She got out of the car, then when she went to open the rear door, where her 4-year-old daughter was, she couldn't open it because the rubber didn't. It seemed like it was melting. She just couldn't open the door.
Unable to free them, Gina and her son rushed to the water tank.
When she got here, she screamed and said, "Help me, look, my mother and daughter are trapped. Let's get them out." But it was impossible for us to reach them. Because of the fire, there was no way we could get through it. She wouldn't stop screaming for us to get her daughter. And I said, "Gina, we can't. Try to stay calm." She was very burned. She couldn't take it. She screamed a lot. It was horrible. Hell.
Just before 8 p.m., Maria's village is completely surrounded by fire, and the blaze continues to spread quickly westwards. For those who've chosen to try to outrun the fire, there is one major escape route left: the main N236 road. Wide, with areas either side of it free from trees, it should be a relatively safe way out. But as firefighter Fernando Tomé races along it, he finds the landscape is completely ablaze.
This is exactly the route we were on. When we got here, we could see that ahead of us, everything was consumed by fire, coming towards us at such a high speed. We suddenly realized the enormity of the situation.
What Fernando doesn't know is that the pyrocumulus cloud that's been constantly growing in size and strength is closing in on this major escape route, and it's morphing into something even more destructive.
Pyrocumulus cloud keeps intensifying and keeps, developing vertically. Then it kind of switches gears into what we call a pyrocumulonimbus cloud. That's essentially a fire-generated thunderstorm over a fire.
As the fast, fire-breathing pyrocumulonimbus cloud grows in height and mass, it draws in more and more hot air to sustain it. By 7:50 p.m., it reaches 40,000 feet into the stratosphere. This is a critical turning point. At that altitude, the cloud begins to cool, and the hot air isn't enough to keep it aloft. Running low on power, the cloud begins to collapse under its own weight, plummeting towards Earth in a phenomenon known as a downburst. And right beneath it are those trying to escape on the N236.
It was like a bomb went off, like a fireball was in the sky when it collapsed.
The downburst creates wind speeds in excess of 70 miles per hour. Acting like a vast set of bellows, it supercharges the fire.
It happened so quickly, there's no escaping it. It would have been on them in an instant. It's pretty much not survivable when you have those sort of conditions.
30 people die on this 300-yard stretch of road. By 8 p.m., the supercharged inferno created by the collapsing fire cloud accelerates the fire spread even further. Fernando and his crew drove through the area of the downburst just moments before it happened. But as they race along the N236, they're engulfed by fire and blinded by thick smoke.
This is precisely where the accident took place. There was another car coming towards us at high speed. We had time to shout, "We're going to hit it!" Then we did hit it. The impact was like something out of this world. The car that crashed into us was thrown here. Our truck was in the other lane. The fire immediately spread all around us. There was no time for anything. I went to check to see if there was anything we could do for the people inside the car. But there was no way. They were unconscious. We couldn't do anything for them. There was no way to save anyone from that accident. The heat was, it was just so hot because the fire was on both sides, and we were in the middle of it. It was too hot to stay here, so we had to abandon the car. We ran in that direction. It was the road crossing ahead.
Fernando and his crew run towards the only cover they can find.
The only protection we had were the traffic signs. We were here for a while, crouching behind the signs, like this. It was all the protection we had. The fire was all around us, so we didn't have anywhere else to hide. I had the cap, but I lost it in the wind, and my hair started burning with the heat. I honestly thought I would die there.
Fernando and his crew endure the intense heat for 45 minutes. They're eventually rescued by an ambulance crew and rushed straight to hospital.
I burned my hands. I burned my whole face, my head, the back of my legs, calves. I also burned 30% of my airways.
When the sun comes up the following day, the scale of the fire's destruction is revealed for the first time. As the fire dies down around the village of Notorino, Dave leaves a house where he took refuge overnight and goes in search of his wife, Jackie.
Waited till first light and decided to cycle to our friends Terry and Maria, who live at a local village only 5 minutes away. I was just hoping and praying that I didn't see the wreckage of Jackie's vehicle. That's just what I didn't want to see. There was still a lot of smoke about. The heat coming off the banks was still intense. They were really hot. Trees were burning. And I just started to come round a corner on the bike, and I had to stop because I didn't really believe what I was seeing. There was a young girl lay dead in the road. She'd obviously came from the opposite direction. A vehicle had hit a tree. You could see where the door had opened. She'd obviously tried to run, but she lay in the road in front of me. Not knowing where Jackie was and just seeing the young girl, no, it was a terrible feeling, yeah.
Desperate to find his wife and fearing the worst, Dave continues his search for Jackie. Nadia Piazza hurries back to Portugal and heads straight to her ex-husband's house, desperate for news of her son, Luis.
We drove to the family home, where my family should have been with my son, his dad, his grandma, and many other people. When I got to the house, I panicked because I saw a house totally in the dark, with the gates open, as if it had been abandoned. I looked everywhere. No one could tell me anything. I went to all the shelters with a list of names in my hand. I was crying. I knew they wouldn't be there. I got a call from the police saying their car had been caught in the fire.
Luis, his father, and 7 other members of his family all died on the N236 during the catastrophic downburst. Still frantically searching for his wife, Jackie, Dave makes it to his friend's house.
Saw that Terry Maria's vehicle was there, which was good. They answered the door straight away. I said, I can't find Jackie, need some help.
They head straight to the nearby town, where many of the locals have taken refuge for the night.
He kept trying to reassure me that she's going to be okay. A terrible feeling. We drove into Figaro, and there Jackie stood in front of us. We just embraced each other, and my friend Terry said it was something which movies are made of.
Dave turned up with Terry in the car, and I saw him, and he climbed out the car.
Just to see her alive was, yeah, it was unbelievable.
I said I'd never fall out with him again, but I have. But, yeah. And I just said, where have you been? was just so thankful he was alive.
After a good few hugs and kisses and realising that we were both still alive, and I thought we were both very, very lucky.
The Pedrogo fire rages for another 3 days. Water-bombing planes and helicopters arrive from Spain, France, and Italy to help. It takes 2,000 firefighters and the help of hundreds of military personnel to finally extinguish it. In total, the fire destroys 115 square miles. More than 200 people are injured, and 67 lose their lives. Portugal's media dubbed the N236 the Road of Death. Some experts warn that this is unlikely to be the last time Portugal will experience a disaster on this scale.
I'm pretty sure that a disaster fire like this can happen again. It doesn't matter which climate change scenario you accept, all of them are predicting more severe fire weather in the future. And knowing that we have these large areas of land covered in dense forest, make sure we will have disaster fires in the future like this.
Fernando's burns were so severe, doctors placed him in a coma for 2 months to allow his lungs to heal.
The scars will stay with me for life. I will have to live with that forever. What worries me most is the problem with my lungs.
It scarred our lives forever. It's so difficult because every day we pass the places where we lost our friends. Even if we wanted to forget, we couldn't. We remember it every day. And it worries us that it could happen again. The same thing. This is what worries me the most.
It was just one afternoon in April. I didn't wake up that day thinking this would be the last.
This will be a day where there's going to be so many tornado warnings.
It's something like I'd never seen before.
We watched this monster form before our very eyes.
These were killer tornadoes on the ground.
And I thought, it's coming for us. It's coming for us.
Stay sheltered. Get underground. These things were monstrous supercell storms.
He was holding her hand, and she just went up and away from him.
It's going to be one of those days where if people didn't take cover, they were going to die.
Coming over the campus buildings.
In April 2011, over just 4 days, more than 360 tornadoes ravaged the southern United States.
Look at the debris. Look at the debris. And all you can do is pray for those people.
It's the deadliest tornado outbreak for 75 years. 321 people are killed, and thousands are made homeless. Now, eyewitness accounts, survivors' footage, and expert scientific analysis reveal the terrible events of the super tornado outbreak. Just over 50 miles north of Birmingham, Alabama, is the small town of Cullman and its population of 15,000.
I'm Kitty Spears, the owner of the Busy Bee Cafe. I've been in business for myself here since 1989. The Busy Bee Cafe is run by family. All my family members work here. We're Coleman's oldest restaurant, and we're the backbone of this town.
100 miles south of Cullman is Tuscaloosa, home to more than 38,000 students from the University of Alabama.
My name's Tori Sheehan. In 2011, I was a student at the University of Alabama, and I was also an intern at WVUA, the local station in Tuscaloosa. So I lived in the eastern part of Tuscaloosa in Alberta. It was a 2-story apartment complex made up mostly of students, but there were also people who weren't students at the university living there. It was my own little place. I mean, it was like a shoebox, basically, but it was mine, and I loved it.
My name is James Spann. My title is Chief Meteorologist for WBMA-TV in Birmingham. Well, I'm an old-timer. I've been here a long time. Growing up in rural South Alabama, the storms on a summer afternoon were unbelievably awesome. Where for everybody else, they were a nuisance, but for me, they were fascinating. But we have 2 tornado alleys. One is the traditional tornado alley. This is the southern Great Plain, states like Oklahoma and Kansas. But we have a secondary area in the southeast United States, Alabama, Mississippi, Tennessee, Arkansas, North Louisiana, North Georgia. And that has been dubbed as Dixie Alley.
And it's Dixie Alley, with its denser populations and higher concentration of mobile homes, that has the deadliest tornadoes each year.
We have a lot of our population away from cities that live in manufactured housing. And simply by nature of the beast, air can get under them and go above them, and they can go airborne. For those that live in them, they have to be thinking about this way, way, way before a tornado.
In early April 2011, unusually warm, moist air from the Gulf of Mexico is moving north, while cold fronts head southeast from the Midwest and Plain states. The two collide and are churned further by howling winds in the jet stream. It's a turbulent breeding ground for supercells, some of the most dangerous storms on Earth. They're capable of spawning the most violent of tornadoes. With the most powerful tornadoes being up to a mile wide, with spiraling winds of up to 250 miles an hour, alarm bells are ringing in the deep south.
We don't like to cry wolf, but in the days leading up to April 27th, we started seeing strong thunderstorms that actually developed into supercell thunderstorms. Supercells are long-lived, and statistically, they're the type of storms that produce not just tornadoes, but typically the bigger tornadoes, the more violent tornadoes.
A supercell forms when conflicting winds cause horizontal spin in the lower atmosphere. Warm updrafts then force it vertically to form a mesocyclone, the spinning heart of a supercell. It draws in more warm air, driving the rotation faster. Rapidly descending air at the rear of the storm can then drag the mesocyclone towards the ground. If it touches down, a tornado is born.
Once we got within about 5 days, it became obvious that April 27th could be a problematic type day. We didn't know where tornadoes would touch down, how many tornadoes we were going to have, exactly what state maybe would take the brunt of this, but somebody in the Deep South was going to have a really bad day.
Severe weather a possibility by midweek. Chance of supercell storms Wednesday afternoon.
In the early hours of Wednesday, the 27th of April, the predicted storm system hits James Spann's home state of Alabama.
Walking in here, I knew I had to get my microphone strapped on and get ready to go on television immediately. It was just a sense of urgency and a sense of, I hope we're not in over our heads.
These storms are very serious, so let's kind of reset here. It's 5:40. A lot of you are just waking up now to the sirens going off.
There were terrible thunderstorms that morning, even before the sun was up. And I remember just laying down and hearing, like right when you're about to wake up, but you're still not fully awake, and hearing the thunder.
During the morning hours, 7 states are hit by a massive storm system. 92 tornadoes touch down, stretching from Louisiana all the way north to Ohio.
That morning, April 27th, we were extremely busy because there were storms earlier that morning in the town next to us, and everybody was coming to Coleman because they had no power and everything.
By 9 a.m., the weather system across Mississippi and Alabama completely transforms.
Looks like we might see several hours of sunshine this morning, and that in turn could lead to some really rough weather later today.
When we saw the sun break out, thinking, oh goodness, that's the last thing you want. And that's really going to heat the air up and make the air buoyant and set the stage for some horrible storms later in the day.
This is the time where you go to a safe place now, as low as you can go, underground if you can get there, no mobile homes and no cars. So again,
Ignoring the warnings, storm chaser Reed Timmer decides to head in the direction of one of the supercell storms, near the town of Philadelphia in Mississippi.
By afternoon, our target storm developed to the east of Jackson, Mississippi, and right when that storm developed, it assumed textbook supercell characteristics. And our plan was to find an open meadow that was directly in the path of that storm. Suddenly, the forest opened up, had a clear view to the southwest, and then bam!
Oh my God! There's houses up there!
You guys, this is probably one of the strongest tornadoes I've ever seen.
As the 2011 tornado super outbreak begins to intensify, a massive twister has just touched down in Philadelphia, Mississippi.
Oh my God, look at the horizontal vortices on the left side. Horizontal vortices feeding into it.
Directly in its path is storm chaser Reed Timmer.
Look at the left side! Look at the left side!
It was approaching rapidly, and we saw the massive wedge. We knew it was powerful at that point. Very large tornado, very compact supercell structure as well. You could see the whole entire updraft and the rain shaft next to it. Rapid upward motion on the left side, horizontal vortices feeding into it, and you knew that we were dealing with a different monster.
Houses up there! Houses!
I was freaking out trying to let them know that there was a dangerous tornado heading for their location.
As it races along the ground, the half-a-mile-wide tornado suddenly becomes even more deadly as it mutates into a multiple vortex tornado made up of smaller vortices.
One of them touched down right near that power pole that dug a trench out of the ground over 2 feet deep. Everything in its path was ripped out of the ground.
Philadelphia's multiple vortex tornado, with rotational winds of up to 205 miles per hour, is given the most powerful rating on the enhanced Fujita scale, EF5.
Oh my God.
It's the first EF5 in the Dixie Alley tornado region for more than a decade.
Go that way.
With tornadoes on average killing 80 people every year in the U.S., atmospheric scientists from the University of Wisconsin are leading the drive to reduce this death toll.
We want to be able to predict the tornado's occurrence ahead of time. We want to be able to tell the public long before one of these tornadoes occurs that it's going to occur and where it's going to occur. In this simulation, we have a storm that produces a multiple vortex tornado. Boom, there's your tornado. And it starts out as like a needle-thin, narrow thing, maybe 100 meters across. Very strong winds right off the top, but you'll notice as time goes on, it gets wider. Eventually, this thing gets wrapped in rain, but as it gets widened, you start to see embedded within this tornado are what you might think of as mini tornadoes. They're called suction vortices. And the multiple vortices are all kind of rotating about the center of a tornado. They each contain a center of low pressure and winds spiraling around them. So you have a combination of horizontal winds that are able to be so strong that you can just lift the top of a piece of pavement off and it's going to be pulled away, peeled away. Then you have a suction vortex that comes in and literally draws mass upwards from the ground because the updraft is so strong.
By 2 p.m., the sky's full of potentially deadly supercells raging across Dixie Alley and beyond.
This is probably the most serious event, quite frankly, going back maybe over the 32 years I've been here. There are multiple storms. All of these are life-threatening.
It was going to be one of those days where if people didn't take cover, they were going to die.
With lives at stake, Matt Lobhahn is in just his third week of a new job as a meteorologist at WTVA in Tupelo, Mississippi.
To be a new person forecasting here, I doubted what I was looking at. You know, I'm looking at this, and I'm like, I mean, this is as extreme as it can get. It's something like I'd never seen before. How do I believe that I can convince them to trust me that this kid knows what he's talking about? This could be a tornado developing. This has not been reported as a tornado on the ground. Almost every storm on the radar looked like it could be producing a tornado. It was the most overwhelmed I have ever felt.
On radar, many of the supercell storms are showing the ominous hallmark of a potentially developing tornado, a hook echo.
As we go from 2 p.m. to about 2:30, this is a half an hour here. Now look how we have clearly 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 of these supercellular thunderstorms, and even the storms that haven't really developed have a little hook echo. Everything has a hook echo. Every single one of them.
A hook echo is caused by precipitation and rapidly descending cold air at the rear of the storm as it wraps around the supercell's mesocyclone. It's this descending air that can drag a mesocyclone to the ground. And it's a sure sign that a tornado may be about to form. But on April 27, 2011, the deadly weather system is set to break almost all known records.
What was so different about this was we had so much of the ingredients over such a large area that it wasn't that we were going to produce one, that we would produce multiple long track tornadoes that aren't just down for a minute and done, but down for half an hour, an hour.
Within minutes of the massive Philadelphia tornado, another supercell is showing the hook echo as it fast approaches the town of Cullman, Alabama.
Gosh, goodness gracious. Let's take a look at those cloud bases. Are you kidding me? And you know,
I cannot believe we can see that far away.
We watched a rapidly, and I mean rapidly, developing thunderstorm. that went from a shower to a supercell within literally 20, 25 minutes.
It's down.
The tornado has formed.
Just making a beeline right toward downtown Coleman. Based on what we're seeing on the Skycam, that tornado down at the base could be 1/2 mile wide. Goodness gracious. Everybody in downtown Coleman should be in a safe place, hunkered down right now.
But Kitty Spears, owner of Coleman's Busy Bee Cafe, has decided to stay at work.
It was 3 o'clock. It was closing time. And I come to the cash register to get the money. And I just had pushed a button to open the cash register, and all of a sudden, my ears started hurting, and I was doing this number, and I just happened to look up, and I could see coming over the bridge a cloud on the ground, a big, wide, dirty cloud just coming straight at me. I didn't see a funnel. I just saw a cloud on the ground, and I could see stuff flying in the cloud. I could see debris flying. It was dirty, nasty looking. And I knew it was a tornado.
And this is coming right through the middle of downtown Coleman. And you can see the debris swirling underneath this thing. This is a tornado emergency for the city of Coleman. Goodness gracious.
We knew this was bad, and I had great fear that we would have loss of life.
Kitty Spears' son, Kyle, and his father race towards downtown Coleman, and Kyle films the aftermath. As they reach the Busy Bee Cafe, they make a shocking discovery.
It's just a whole pile of rubble.
When we came around the corner, we see that the business was destroyed. There was nothing there. We just drove right up as fast as could and just parked in the middle of the road, and I ran out screaming for my mom.
The whole Busy Bee was destroyed.
My dad, he was running around frantically too, looking for my mother.
This is the whole downtown area.
He was running around lifting things up. We were both just frantic. I was yelling. He was flipping everything over to see if he could find her in the rubble.
It was just absolutely obliterated. Churches tore up.
It's not just the Busy Bee Cafe that's gone. Much of downtown Coleman has been destroyed. With fewer than 2% of tornadoes rating at EF4 or higher, Coleman is desperately unlucky to be hit by one. Whole buildings have been leveled, and cars lifted off the ground by rotational winds of 175 miles an hour.
There's Eastside Baptist Church right there.
6 people have died.
See that power line down right there?
Kitty Spears is one of the lucky ones.
Some people came running up, and they told us that my mom had been found in the rubble. She was in really bad pain, beat up, bloody, bruised. I was relieved that she was still alive, because I thought this was going to be the day that my mom was leaving me.
The roof's gone, and it just sucked the whole place out. No front, no back, no nothing.
I jumped under the counter as far as I could get, and next thing I know it, the whole building exploded, and I couldn't move. I was just trapped. I could feel everything just falling on top of me, pounding me, hitting me. I couldn't move. I just could not move from the weight of everything on top of me. And I didn't realize I was even hurt until they started digging me out. It's when I just started screaming in excruciating pain because I shattered my pelvis. The Wizard of Oz used to be one of my favorite movies when I was a child. And then I got to live it.
Our county
At the same time as the Coleman tornado, James Spann is tracking another powerful supercell storm that is showing a clear hook echo.
So this lead storm is approaching Hackleburg.
The longest and most deadly tornado of the super outbreak is about to strike.
Everybody in Hackleburg, be in a safe place now.
Mid-afternoon on the 27th of April 2011, and a powerful supercell storm is bearing down on the town of Hackleburg, Alabama.
I was just pleading with the viewers, you've got to listen, you've got to pay attention, you've got to get shelter. You want to be in an interior part of that lowest floor. Take blankets and pillows with you if you can. Otherwise, get underneath something sturdy. If you're not in a reinforced shelter, if you're not in a well-built structure, and a tornado with 210 miles per wind is coming toward you, if you're in a mobile home, you will die.
And so this lead storm is approaching Hackleburg. Everybody in Hackleburg, be in a safe place now.
Then, meteorologists' worst fears are realized. The telltale sign of a tornado touching down, known as a debris signature, forms on radar. It confirms the supercell has now spawned a tornado, and it's heading straight for Hackleburg.
A debris signature is literally a circle that you see on radar. And at the middle of that circle is where the tornado is. And all of the debris that's being lifted off the ground is reflecting back the energy to the radar site. And so that deepest purple, that's a bunch of trees, and that's a bunch of houses and other things that are all just spinning around at more than 200 miles per hour.
The tornado rips through Hackleburg, and it shows no sign of stopping as it bears down on the neighboring town of Phil Campbell and its population of just over 1,000 people. Local police officer Gary Wayne Mays grabs a camera and begins filming the approaching tornado.
When I came out, I got here and I noticed the clouds were looking real black back that way, and kind of reminded you of watching The Wizard of Oz. You know, you're watching it and you're seeing this big swirling cloud up there. Phil Campbell 3 to 911. I got rotation coming through Phil Campbell right now. You saw bright white on this side and bright white on this side, and it was just black. It was just intense wind. You could hear the debris getting torn off the buildings right in front of you. Teddy, run out! Let's get someplace safe!
This thing had a wind velocity of 200 miles per hour or greater. You can't really imagine that. Even well-engineered homes were totally taken off their foundation.
With just 0.1% of tornadoes traveling more than 100 miles, this long-track tornado stays on the ground for more than 2 hours, covering a distance of 130 miles. As it rips through a region with a high concentration of mobile homes, it's the second EF5 to hit Dixie Alley within 60 minutes.
Most tornadoes are down for 5, 10, 15 minutes, they're gone. Most tornadoes are EF0s and EF1s. This was an EF5. EF5s are excessively rare. To have two of them side by side in one day was simply remarkable.
You don't expect to come to work that day and have 26 people die on your shift. We found a young child that had been killed. I didn't find him, but I was there just shortly after one of the fire department gentlemen found him. And it's bad when it's an adult, but it's a little worse feeling when it's a child.
As the tornado continues to move northeast, it becomes the deadliest for half a century, as 72 people lose their lives. At the same time, a third EF5 is about to land near the town of Smithville, Mississippi. With a wave of potentially deadly supercell storms moving across the southern United States, James Spann is desperately trying to warn viewers to take shelter.
A lot of the severe weather parameters are just off the charts. Any of these storms could erupt and go severe in a heartbeat.
But there's a limit to meteorologists' ability to precisely forecast a tornado.
It is the most frustrating thing. We can see this violent rotation on radar, but we don't know if it's aloft or on the ground. We have no idea. To really for sure know if there's a tornado down, we need somebody looking at it.
And with only around 20% of supercells forming into tornadoes, this leads to another problem.
Currently have about a 75% false alarm rate with tornado warnings. For every 3 out of 4 tornado sirens that goes off, only 1 in 4 is a tornado. And rightly so, the public can sometimes get a little jaded from that.
But with so many massive supercells still raging, meteorologists at national weather offices across the region are taking no chances.
We were really pushing it hard with this event due to all the ingredients coming together for violent killer tornadoes. At that point, it's a matter of, do people have a safe place to go, and are they going to get to it?
After a day of intermittent sirens, retired truck driver Paul Estes and his family are at their local diner in Smithville, Mississippi, trying to go about their lives as normal.
Storm sirens were going off and on through the day, but we had gotten to a point where we just didn't, we got kind of complacent, so there goes the sirens again.
But just after 3:30 p.m., everything changes.
Well, the next thing I knew, one of the employees said, "There's a tornado on the way, shut the gas off, and y'all get in the coolers." So I jumped in the cooler and pulled the cooler door shut. This is what we hid in to get away from the tornado and get into some safety. My daughters were screaming, and I could hear my wife praying, and I grabbed the door. And that was my job, was to hold that door shut.
Just after 3:40 p.m., the third EF5 in just over 60 minutes touches down. With rotational speed in excess of 200 miles per hour, it's heading directly towards the town of Smithville. It's so powerful that it lifts a vehicle 130 feet and sends it smashing into the town's water tower.
I'd never seen a debris signature that was that compact. Within the next scan, Smithville's been hit, and that storm is already through Smithville. And then the reports start coming in from the field, and it's just, you're shell-shocked. It's absolute, utter devastation.
As the storm subsides, it's clear much of central Smithville has suffered catastrophic damage. But Paul Estes and his family have clung to life inside the diner.
When we come out of the cooler, everything was devastated. Everything was leveled. Wood, twisted metal, all the way across to my parents' home.
Paul's parents' house has been completely destroyed.
Well, when I got here, well, it just looked like somebody had shoved it to one side and just broke it into splinters. It was devastating. I don't know that I'd ever saw anything like that before. You know, I've seen pictures on TV of wars and stuff, but I've never seen anything just destroyed like that. That got me scared because I knew Mom and Daddy was in the house. And as I got here, my dad was still alive. He was blown over to the driveway. He had been covered up with a bunch of debris, but I couldn't find my mama. He said he was holding her hand and she just went up and away from him. So I couldn't hold on to her. I just stood there and cried. I mean, I had a good idea she was gone, Mama was dead, but I just stood there and cried.
In just over 60 minutes, there have now been 3 deadly EF5s across Alabama and Mississippi.
You have 3 within an hour. Within the geographic distance we're talking about here is just it's unbelievable. It's unfathomable.
Just when it seems things can't get any worse, just 100 miles from Smithville, another tornado touches down. And this one is heading straight for one of the most heavily populated towns in Alabama.
This is a large, violent tornado coming up on downtown Tuscaloosa. Be in a safe place right now.
A mile-wide, multiple vortex tornado is on track to hit the densely populated city of Tuscaloosa.
And that is a huge tornado that is moving right up on downtown Tuscaloosa. This is an extremely violent situation. Don't take any chances with this. This is as violent a situation as you'll ever see. I want everybody in the city limits of Tuscaloosa to stay sheltered.
University student and TV intern Victoria Sheehan takes shelter at the local station.
I went down into the newsroom, and I remember at one point through the chaos, we were all working on trying to answer phones and trying to keep the latest update of where was this thing. And I just remember hearing someone say, "Oh my God, there it is."
News anchor Lynn Brooks is watching from the same building.
We watched this monster form before our very eyes. And I'm watching this on the monitor, and I thought, it's coming for us. It's coming for us. I had a home video camera with me, and I'm recording this whole time, and I come out the stairwell and look out the window, and there it is. That huge monster that has come to our city.
You're seeing the rotation.
You're just drawn into this
Seeing the debris.
unimaginable sight.
It's coming over the campus buildings.
Everything went black. Boom.
If you are in the city limits of Tuscaloosa or on the campus of the University of Alabama, stay sheltered. Get underground.
As the tornado approaches downtown Tuscaloosa, 25-year-old Ryan Chandler and his friend Nate decide to ignore the warnings.
I was watching James Spann on the news talking about the storms that were coming through. That's actually when I sent out a tweet to see if anybody wanted to chase a storm. And my friend Nate actually replied and said he was game. And we took off down 15th Street.
There it is.
All of a sudden, it was right on top of us.
This is a large, violent tornado coming up on downtown Tuscaloosa. Be in a safe place right now.
It was just this wall of churning clouds, bigger than anything that you can really imagine. The raw power behind it was incredible.
That thing is... Go, Chandler.
It was one of those things you were almost drawn to. I was transfixed on it.
Go back. I'm not kidding.
Oh my God. Nate definitely felt like we were too close, and that's when he became pretty emphatic that we needed to back up. We just put it in reverse and went in reverse down the wrong way on the interstate.
At 1.5 miles wide, the vast tornado rips through the city.
We're getting reports of major damage in Tuscaloosa. Look at the debris. Look at the debris. And all you can do is pray for those people.
I can't even recognize this place. Nice power lines. Look at this. Oh, God.
I've never been to war, but it would be the closest thing I've seen to, or I would describe as a war zone. And houses look like they had just been exploded or imploded. Building materials were everywhere.
As they drive through the devastation, suddenly they spot a sign of life.
Come on. Get in. Come on.
Oh my God, my dog!
Are you okay? Hey, are people okay?
I don't know.
All of a sudden, everything went from fun and games and chasing a storm to a reality that there were people that were trapped and people that were hurt and people that could be dead.
I can't call nobody. Oh my God, y'all.
A deadly multiple vortex tornado has just hit a densely populated area of Tuscaloosa. Local student Victoria Sheehan films the aftermath with no idea if her home is still standing.
There's just people walking down the main roads in Tuscaloosa. Oh, this used to be the church. We actually came over a slight hill, and you could look out and you saw University Boulevard, and it was just, it looked like a war zone. I remember there were helicopters flying over above. They were still doing search and rescue. I remember the first time realizing, like, this is my community, this is where I live. We walked and we turned, and there was so much debris. I mean, I've just never seen anything like this. But we looked out, and for a second, it looked like my apartment. Oh my God. We were all so excited.
Oh my God.
No, there's someone in it. Half of it.
There's someone in there.
It's bad.
No, that's the bottom.
Wow. In an instant, it comes into focus that actually I don't see anything of my apartment left. There were kids right down the street that died, and they didn't have a chance at a future. The fact that their story ends there, it's really tough because there's nothing that can be done to bring them back. And it was just one afternoon in April. And they didn't wake up that day thinking this would be the last.
It doesn't look like our city anymore. Where did it go? Where's our city? You live on the same street for 20, 30 years, and people would make the wrong turn to go to their own home because there's no more landmarks anymore.
With damage of more than $2 billion, the Tuscaloosa tornado becomes one of the most costly in U.S. history. With winds in excess of 190 miles an hour, it's rated at EF4. More than 4,000 homes are destroyed, and 65 people lose their lives.
I think we could have done much better. I think with hindsight, you know which of these storms was going to be a killer. You can hone in more on those. I would love to think with more experience that we could have said the right things. But they were going to be killers regardless.
There is no book, there is no manual, there is no class on how to handle one day with 62 tornadoes in one state. History will judge us on how we perform that day. I don't know, I have no earthly idea. But to me, it wasn't the number of EF5s, it wasn't the number of EF4s, it was the number of people that died. That's what's in my mind.
We all experienced our weakest moment. We had been brought to our knees by this. But in that moment of weakness, when all the material possessions were stripped away, and you realized you had maybe someone that you loved to still hold on to, you saw a strength in people like you would have never seen otherwise.
By the end of April 28, 2011, over 4 consecutive days, 362 tornadoes have caused damage in excess of $11 billion. 321 people have lost their lives in one of the most devastating tornado outbreaks in U.S. history.